Welcome to Mastery TV, our effort to pull back the curtain at the Mastery School of Hawken and to dig into issues around teaching and learning and the way forward. I'm Julia Griffin, Director of the Mastery School of Hawken. Earlier this year, we hosted a virtual event for prospective students and families called Finding Your Voice at the Mastery School, which was led by my colleagues Janae Peters and Dr. Ashley Poklar. At the Mastery School, we know that all young people, but especially girls, and those who identify as either girls, gender non-binary, or gender non-conforming, really benefit from an intentionally designed high school that helps them develop a strong understanding of their own values and strengths. This kind of self-knowledge and the confidence that comes from it enables them to purposefully use their voices to really lean in and speak up and stay true to themselves. That work is central to our academic program and everything we do at the Mastery School. So I'm really excited to share with you some glimpses of these conversations. As a whole, if you've been to other events that we've done, you may well have heard Scott Looney, the head of Hawken School, and really in many ways the visionary behind this project, talk about the industrial production model of education. And he often shows this slide, right? And shows rows of desks in 1916, rows of desks in 2016, and talks about something that the author Todd Rose calls the standardization covenant. The idea that in a standardized system, in the standardized system of school, as it's traditionally understood, as a student, your job is to be the same as everybody else, only better. Well, I think that that's a message that lands sometimes especially hard for girls, where all of the messages in society actually are telling you the same thing, to be the same as everybody else, only better. And that confluence of messages, what you hear in school, what you hear in the world, that can be really devastating as, you know, in the moment when girls are approaching adolescence, and it can really threaten their sense of individuality and who they are. And this, of course, is the topic of the book, Reviving Ophelia by Mary Pfeiffer, that we have sent out to you and that we hope you'll have a chance to read when it arrives your way. So we believe at the Mastery School that school doesn't have to be part of this problem. And in fact, we think that the way we do it, it can be part of the solution. And so what we believe can take the place, and what at the Mastery School does take the place of this industrial production model, it looks more like this. It's the idea of deeper learning and transferable learning. And there's a lot of research at this point on what works. We know actually from cognitive science, we know from many studies what leads to the kinds of deep and transforming learning experiences. And it boils down to the same things. Students need to feel a sense of connection. They need to feel empowerment and agency, that their education isn't something that's happening to them, but something that they really are driving in as much as possible. They need to see context and purpose and relevance and why the work that they're doing matters. And research suggests that these things may matter even more for girls, for whom that sense of a broader context and what the human beings are behind the learning can be a really powerful motivator. So these principles and the idea of a personalized experience that's really much more motivating for many students than grades, these are right at the heart of what we do at the Mastery School. And our work in the core of the school, in the wayfinding program, as well as in the other learning experiences that students have in macros and micros, is all about helping students on that journey of belonging and purpose that comes from knowing yourself, knowing what you love, what your strengths are, and how to help how those can contribute to making a difference in the world. So what's so exciting for us in our model is that we have a whole methodology that helps support this work. And that's how we do what we do in the Mastery School. So in our macros especially, students learn while they work on teams on the challenges of others with local community partners. We work very intentionally at cultivating that sense of belonging and purpose in everything that we do. And the overall goal for every student is individual growth across an array of domains that we call our mastery credit areas. So it's not about competing with each other. It's not about getting a grade. It's not about trying to figure out how to slip through the needle of being perfect. That's not what our work is about at all.
All right, I'm Dr. Poklar. I go by Dr. P at the Mastery School, and surprisingly, I've only been with Hawken for 2 years, though when you add a pandemic to it, it feels way longer than that. And I just want to kind of talk a little bit more about that individual development and the fact that for adolescents, the single most important task that they have is to figure out who they are within the context of their family and within the context of their school, their community, and themselves, what they're going to hold on to and what they're going to get rid of. And surprisingly enough, that healthy development occurs in the same kind of setting that true deep learning occurs in. So the Mastery School is a really good place for adolescents to focus on their sense of identity. Next. And you'll see throughout here, I'll add some quotes from the book that we're sending to you all. And it really helps to hone in on what this means for students, for girls. Something dramatic happens to girls in early adolescence. Just as planes and ships disappear mysteriously into the Bermuda Triangle, so do the selves of girls go down in droves. They lose their resiliency and optimism and become less curious and inclined to take risks. Girls know they are losing themselves. Wholeness is shattered by the chaos of adolescence. So the question is, what does that mean and what do we do about it? Next. It boils down to the fact that girls, all adolescents, but girls especially, get a lot of mixed messages, which lead to identity confusion. For example, the little cartoon to the side, school expects students to be independent, innovative, critical thinkers, but also do everything that the adult's telling them to do. So there's these mixed messages coming at them just in general, and having these different expectations coming from media, coming from parents, coming from school, coming from peers, leads to difficulty really having a clear sense of who they are, not really knowing what to expect of themselves or of others, struggling to respond to others in situations in a coherent way. It's hard to know how to be your whole self, how to be your true self when you're also trying to meet all these other expectations of what you're supposed to be. And girls get a lot of that. They get expectations about what it means to be a girl. You're supposed to be pretty, you're supposed to be kind, you're supposed to be giving, but they're also told that they can be anything they want to be. And not just that they can be, but they should be. And this leads to identity confusion, which can lead to uncertainty, confusion. It can lead into cycles of anxiety, depression, and just trouble building and maintaining strong relationships because you're not able to be your whole self in some of them. And so back to another quote from the book, next. With puberty, girls face enormous cultural pressure to split into their false selves. They can be true to themselves and risk abandonment by their peers, or they can reject their true selves and be socially acceptable. And the writer breaks it down to 4 ways that girls have that they can react to the cultural pressures that are put on them. They can conform, withdraw, be depressed, or get angry. However, in an environment like the Mastery School, where they're encouraged to find themselves and to be themselves and to figure out who they are, that helps them not have to fall into those negative ways of viewing themselves. Next. So in closing, around this topic, adolescence, again, is that time for identity building. It's not a small task at any time and place, but it seems to be getting harder. Identity comes from introspection, deep talk with friends, time spent with family that helps girls see themselves in the context of family and community. So again, these deep learning experiences where girls are faced with the community and with what's going on in the community and how they fit into the community, help them get into these introspective ways, these deeper talks. One of the sad paradoxes for adolescent girls today is that while they greatly value freedom and tolerance, they're captives of their devices and imprisoned by their need for continual affirmations. Instead of searching for true selves, they cultivate followers. True freedom requires knowing oneself, a strong sense of intention, and careful choices about actions. Those are things that we focus on here at the Mastery School. And instead of me just talking about it, we have some great women that work in our school setting and that could be great role models for your girls who have gone this path and can help teach your girls how to go on this path as well.
So I teach architecture and design here at the Mastery School, and I was a practicing architect for 9 years prior to coming to the Mastery School. I've been teaching here at Hawken. This is my 3rd year. So when I think about finding my voice, I think about a quote from Farshid Musavi, who is the architect who designed the Museum of Contemporary Art here in Cleveland. And she's a wildly impressive female architect who's done amazing things. But she once said that her difference is her strength. So oftentimes she would be in meetings and be the only woman. And it was her difference that made her shine. And it always, that quote always reminds me of a story early in my career. I was brought into a job meeting, I think mostly because I was young and cheap labor, and they brought me to measure space. But the project was a gym with a locker room, and we sat around talking about designing this space, and all of a sudden everyone realized that everyone in this meeting was male besides me. And so this gym locker room for women was going to be designed without a female's voice. And it made me realize that being a woman was not in any way something to overcome, but really something to embrace. And I think, being a woman or being anyone and having your life experiences is always what's important to bring to the table, especially in design work and in this problem solving work that we do at the Mastery School, where we're asked to solve problems, and everyone's unique perspective is not just tolerated, but celebrated and important to that work.
So when I was really thinking about, finding your voice, what I started to think about was power. Right. And so like thinking of finding your voice as like accessing or engaging power. And when I think about when that happened for me, and actually some of my discomfort with the term power versus voice, like I prefer voice, but it's really, a lot of those things are working for me. I think because of the intention and responsibility that you talked about, Dr. Folkler. But when I think about it as like a power to or a power of, then that helps me feel better about it. So I think I discovered my power to use my voice and have it be heard, and also the power of that level of influence and connection. And honestly, like I honed those skills with my family first. I was a little wild one, and my family is filled with super strong people, strong personalities who've experienced so much like in their world. But as a small child, so about 6, 7 years old, I started conducting classes for my younger twin siblings. Like I taught them the French alphabet when I was 7 and they were 2. And then sometimes my younger cousins were there, and I would teach them and make them do whatever it was that I wanted to do. And sometimes like it was really about sharing with them everything I learned at what I call big girl school. But the other piece of it, like if I'm being honest, like in less mature moments, it was really just being bossy. But the major point of this is that they listened to me for whatever reason. And when I look back on those experiences, which never really ended, I realized that people listen to me, and I've carried that sense of responsibility with me throughout my life. So as an educator, it's helped me to be responsible with my words and truths. And I've also learned when it's best to access the power to and the power of, and the difference between, or the wisdom between knowing the difference of the power to and power of. And I think the full origin of it really was my mother making sure that I knew that my voice, my thoughts, my experiences, all of that mattered from the time I started talking. And it's interesting because my mom got a lot of criticism for the way that she allowed me to ask questions of her, like of her actions, of what she did. Because there are some ways you just don't play like that in some communities. But my mother never backed down when I asked why something was happening, or why someone was feeling some way, or anything like that. And I really credit her being comfortable with that, um, with giving me space to observe and engage in meaning making for myself. And she also made sure that I knew that it wasn't without consequence sometimes, which is where the intention part comes in. But I had the space to exercise my thoughts and convictions, try them on, take them off, and have them be held accountable too. I think you offered us here as role models, Dr. P, and the story I'm going to tell is maybe not quite a role model. It kind of is. I'll put it in perspective. But the first time I did this outside of my family, so in community, was in college, and it was the first time that I participated in a symposium, and I didn't think too much of it. Like I was using my critical lens, my hermeneutics of suspicion that I had been, honing for my whole life, and the the symposium was about Black literature and academia or something like that. And I had just finished taking a course in college that was based on that. But I was not pleased with the course and how it was carried out. And the symposium, my paper, was talking about what it should have been and how it could have been better. And I remember the woman who was the director of the Women and Gender Studies department came up to me afterward and said, "That was really bold." And I hadn't actually thought about that, but the person who taught the class was a very powerful person that no one really criticized or came up against. And we ended up having big conversations, and I really started to like, there are things that I would have done differently in that space, of course, like knowing what I now know. But I am glad that I felt able to access that and use my power and make known things that could be different, especially given the fact that I could have shrunk, not participated in the symposium at all, just kind of sat there and gone through the course and not made anything happen. And when I think of the Mastery School, what we're particularly poised to do at the Mastery School is because we are developing, because we're iterating, because we're responding to feedback, students have a lot of space to exercise their thoughts and convictions and give us their sense of what's going on based on things that they know from home, from outside of home, and in school environments. And I think that the way we're set up makes it easy for people to find access to their voice and power starting. It's not like, oh, by the time you were a senior or when you're a senior, you'll have it. Like, there are many opportunities to exercise it. And I think that's what's great about the Mastery School.
I was an aerospace engineer before I transitioned to teaching. And I think one of my sort of memorable moments of finding my voice was in my high school physics class. Obviously, as an engineer, I loved physics, found it absolutely fascinating. Started taking my AP physics class and immediately bumped up against the fact that it is really hard, and you get things wrong a lot. And I remember, doing not so great on a test, and being pretty bummed out about it. And as I came in the next day, my teacher pulled me aside and was like, I think you'd make a really great engineer. And it was this sort of discordance between, thinking like, oh, I'm horrible at that. Like, I can't do this. Physics is really hard and I'm really bad at it. And being told like, no, you actually, you have a lot of the right things. I think, I'm a recovering perfectionist, as I think probably many women are. And I think, we receive, especially as women in STEM, a lot of messages around like, well, you have to be perfect and you have to never be wrong, because if you're wrong, it's because you're a girl, not just because everybody's wrong because it's really hard. And so, that's one of those things that took me a really long time and lots of encouragement from mentors and peers to sort of work through. But what I think is so great about this mastery model of education is it really, centers this idea of iteration and that there is no such thing as perfection, which is really, central to everything, and definitely also engineering, and engineering design. That you have to be willing to try something and fail over and over and over again, and have the resilience and the confidence in yourself to say like, okay, this isn't because like, this doesn't mean it can't be done. It doesn't mean that I can't do it. It just means that I need to keep going and try again. And I think that, that encouragement and mentorship that I received from my teachers is one of those things that I really try to, emulate, and that I think we all try to emulate here, in terms of encouraging our students and our girls especially to embrace that failure as a really important part of the process.
Thanks.
I love hearing these stories, and I'm glad Julia was able to get that one out before she had to run back to her young daughter. So I skipped a grade when I was in elementary school, and it's funny. I think what that did to me was caused me to take a step back and become even more of a listener and observer than I might have already been inclined to be. And probably also escalated my tendency to want to, to hesitate and overthink and want to make sure I was getting things right, because I knew I was new and I wasn't sure I was supposed to be there. And that kind of continued as I went through my education. And I, was a white middle-class girl in a big suburban high school, and I got a lot of praise for listening, doing my homework really well. I was a pretty good test taker, and again, I got the answers right. And so that was that was how I behaved. I was also really intellectually curious, but that wasn't necessarily what was kind of at the fore of the way my school experience played out. And so, even though I was getting to hone my voice in other places, in my family as perhaps a little like Janae, a very bossy older sister, and in theater where I found that I had all kinds of voice when it was somebody else's words. I had lots of voice there, but in school it was just really much more about I was really good at getting the right answer, and that was what I was pretty sure school was supposed to be about. And so it was actually kind of shockingly late. It was my junior year in college that I really felt like there was a moment where um, I was in a very small tutorial, just a few students, and our teacher, and who was quite a young adjunct professor, announced that he was going to do paper conferences with us where every single paper we wrote in the class, we were going to have an hour-long appointment with him, and he would read the paper aloud to us and stop and ask us questions as we went. And this was a little intimidating to say the least. And so I went to my first one, and as we went through this experience, and he would stop and ask me what I thought and what was I thinking, and why did I write that. Well, first of all, I cried. But second of all, I thought, wow, he really cares what I think. He wants to know actually what I actually think. And come to think of it, I don't know. And like, what do I think? And set me on this completely, it really reinvigorated my love of learning and my curiosity and my love of inquiry. And so I found that I was reinvigorated as a student in a way that my high school experience, unfortunately, just hadn't been what it cultivated. So I think when I think about the ingredients of mastery learning, what I love about what we do and what we get to do at the Mastery School is, for one thing, that mentorship model, that piece that I'm hearing in so many other people's stories as well, of having someone who supports you and believes in you and pushes you, and also thinks that you can do more maybe than you even thought you could. But also I love the idea that we help young people see sooner than it happened for me, certainly, that it isn't actually about getting the right answer, or that the idea that the big problems, the really important problems, are actually not problems where there's a single right answer. And so getting started earlier on that sense of ownership and agency of defining the problems, thinking about what the really important problems are and what I actually think should be done about them, that's so powerful. And we know that young people are ready. They're ready for that work. Like, anyone who teaches high school, has worked with young people, knows that they have that appetite. And it's that school doesn't always give them the credit for it or make the space for that work. So that's what makes me so excited about what we do.
One of the things that we do a lot in the macros is a lot of reflection and thinking about, what activities we just did, and reflecting on them. And often we'll give Post-its out to everyone, and they have to kind of jot down some thoughts before we ask them to share with the group. And I found that having that moment to be able to really think and formulate your thoughts, it just gives you a confidence before you have to speak and share ideas that can be kind of nerve-wracking or in the moment. And that, I think, is just part of best practices for like our activities, our larger challenges. We're constantly reflecting about how those went. So it's definitely something that we do a lot throughout all of the courses.
I think the reflections are good. And I also, another one that comes to mind for me, one with lots of potential, is our one-on-one meetings with students. And part of why I think I'll say that one is because I think about, even as a student, how often I was like trying to help others or like focus on other people. But in the one-on-ones, we have time to actually get to know the students as individuals, like their problems, what they're bringing, what they're doing. And it's a time where, I mean, you could bring in other people, but that's not likely to happen. And so over time, I think that obviously it serves all students, but I think particularly for people who are more inclined to take care of others or be looking out for others, having that one-on-one time is crucial. And I experience as a faculty member this thing because Julia has one-on-one meetings with us too. And so it's a time we do a lot of team stuff. But it's a time where the question is really, what do you need? And then what do you need in the context of what we need? And so I think that's reflected in our work with students as well.
I'm going to say that the structure of share outs in macros in our classes is one that I think works really well for girls. So in a macro, about once a week, students on a team, students are working on a team on a problem presented by a community partner, and they have to stand up once a week with their team and talk about what they've learned, what they're working on next, what they need to figure out, and get feedback from their teacher. And students who are terrified of public speaking at the beginning of a macro will routinely tell us by the end how much more confident they feel because they got to do it with a group of people, because they realized that over time that they could actually do it, and because they could feel themselves getting better. And I think that's extraordinarily good practice for girls.
The agency that students have to explore things that are interesting to them, to build clubs that are interesting to them, to pick different parts of macros or micros that they really want to focus on. I see a difference in the confidence levels of freshman students at the Mastery School versus other schools and other students that I've worked with. This was us as the adults talking about what we think it is for the students. So now I'm going to hand it over to Janae, and she's going to have the students share their experiences.
Go ahead, Bree. And you can introduce yourself and say anything that you like to say about yourself when you go.
All right. Hello, my name is Gabrielle Williams. I go by Bree here. I'm a freshman and a founding class student. So I'm going to be talking about how I found my voice here at the Mastery School through macros and micros. So I'll start off with micros first. So I found my voice at the Mastery School through micros by presenting and truly digging into subjects that I found interesting and what I want to learn and how I want to learn and present what I was learning. So for instance, I found my voice through the politics micro or politics class. So during that micro, students were given the option to find and do research on something political around the world and that they felt had true meaning and had true meaning to them and to present it to the class. So that gave students an opportunity to share what really hit close to home for them and their political beliefs and their voices, and that is their voice and their story. That was a wonderful micro. I loved it a lot. And what each student presented was different, and the students presented what they learned in a different way. So it was very individualized and authentic to the students, and that's the way I found my voice through that micro. And now I'll go on to macros. What did I do personally? I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do research on. I decided to do research on Indigenous sporting camps that America hid history-wise. And I felt like it was important to bring that to the surface and to educate my peers because I felt like that hit close home to me personally. And I thought that was something important to share. So that's what I presented. So macros. So I found my voice through macros, through the challenges that were given and the teamwork and team time that we did. So being in teams really helped me find my voice when it came to sharing my opinion, showing who I am, living in my authenticity, my communication skills, and honing in the way I like to handle things personally, and being able to share that and being able not to be afraid to share that with my peers. Let's see. So I personally feel like going through the personal trial and error with macros is really important because if you choose not to really share your voice and be out there and really be you, who you are as an individual, not only can it bring you down as a person, it can also bring the final product down as a team. And I found that through personal trial and error, and that's something beautiful that the students, we get the chance to do that and we get the chance to really grow as individuals and as ourselves and see each other grow too and really bounce off of that positive energy that we have. And then also too, within my last macro reinvention, we actually had an interlude challenge, which is like a small break between our bigger challenges. And during that time, we actually had the chance to pitch an idea that we, the students, came up with in my team to the head of the school, Mr. Scott Lynn himself. And he actually approved what we, the students, decided would be best. I was part of the extra team, and we were trying to figure out how to make the Mastery School more eco-friendly. And we decided to install LEDs, motion sensor lights, and signs, and different things like that. But we were very deliberate with what we did, and the head of the school agreed with it. And I think that's so powerful that the students actually made change within the school building itself, and that change will be there for like the future to come for the next students. And I think that's really beautiful and such like a really like cool thing that we have that power as the students to really create that change.
So I found my voice at the Mastery School through News Circle. News Circle is just like 5 minutes-ish that we take at the beginning of class to share news and why it's important to us. News Circle really helped me find my voice personally because I am terrified of getting things wrong. And in News Circle, there's no like wrong or right answer. So that kind of helps me like speak up in class a little bit more. I think like Ms. Hodges says, it's like kind of that part of like it's not okay to be wrong. You're wrong because like you're a girl, and I've dealt with that a lot. And so it's just kind of like this space where I can't get something wrong. But also me personally, I look for things like in the news that aren't like shared, like on big news channels, just to like show, hey, there's this whole side of news that like we haven't been seeing. So that's how I personally find my voice.
I found my voice in clubs. So at MSH, I started the GSA club. So I run the meetings and like plan different events, like the movie nights that we have every once in a while. In the club, I get to share my voice and be open with everyone else there without like fear of being judged or told to say something different. And I'm able to speak about things that I think are important and try to spread awareness about different topics to the other people that are there. And it's also just a great place where we get to connect, and I can share like what thoughts I have, how I'm feeling with everyone there, and we can just have great discussions.
So being a girl at the Mastery School, what aspect do you think is the one that you say is best for you as a girl?
I would say the fact that we get to share out everything that we do. So like all the work we do and like any homework that we have or presentations, we just get to share it out. So we get to use our voices and like tell everyone what work we did, how we did that work, and how we came to a conclusion for everything that we do in class. And so it's just great that we get to go step by step and say how we did something.
I would say one-on-ones, because it's kind of hard for me to speak up in my group, especially if there's something wrong. So that one-on-one just kind of gives me a chance to be like, hey, this is what really happened. And it's kind of calming for me because like there's no judgment there because it's just like one person that like I know and trust.
I'd have to say the tight-knit community, and really having that female support as well, and knowing that the female support here, they all know what it's like to be female, and they've all gone through the same things that we've gone through, and it's a very safe space for us, and really truly like we feel like our voices matter, we ourselves matter, as individuals we matter, and our voices are really important, and we're constantly pushed and inspired to really use those voices, and to make sure others hear them and that we are respected as individuals. There's no sexism that goes on here. I always feel like one of the guys, we're really like cool, but still like once you get out there in the real world, we really have to be prepared for a lot of like the male dominated things and careers out there. So I'm really like glad that we have that base and that community that we can like always come back to if we need to.
As it relates to the Mastery School environment or your Mastery School education, what have you personally been most proud of?
Going back to my politics micro. So during that class, I worked with a friend of mine, and we did a project on the Stonewall riots, which was basically a bunch of gay and lesbian bars were raided in the 1970s and started this whole LGBTQ plus rights march. That was really helpful to find my own voice because it was nice seeing that history, especially because I had just came out not long before I came here. So it was nice having that history, but the final project was something I was really proud of because it was something I was interested in, and I worked my butt off with that project. And I just loved the final result so much, especially because there's like a little piece of me in it.
in my intensive, I'm in a sci-fi intensive, so we're making a sci-fi movie, and I made the trailer for our movie, and I was just really proud of it because I really liked the outcome, and every time someone watched it, it would get like a lot of compliments or good deeds, and so I liked that.
I've been very proud of my ability to transition from homeschooling to mastery school learning. Even though homeschooling and mastery learning is kind of one and the same, there's still somewhat of that school structure that kind of keeps the school together, so that we were able to like stay on track with things. And at first that was a little difficult for me, but really having that way, finding support and that teacher support really like helped me a lot. And it really helped me grow, and it really helped me find my voice, especially, like I said before, in group projects and team projects. I myself, I consider myself a perfectionist. I'm trying to move away from that, but it's been quite the journey. I'm very grateful for. So that's something I'm very proud of.
Part of what is happening, because we're the Mastery School and we're in our first year, finishing up the first year. Is we're having to rethink and re-engage everything that we know to be true and real about school, and think about like what can be, and like that's a big shift. But as we think about that, and as we think about gender and other identities, it's a refreshing thing to be able to think about it and see what we can do with it.